this is Yevgen Matushenko with Укрінформ, and today we have the Ambassador of Switzerland to Ukraine, Mr. Felix Baumann. Hello.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Well, so many important questions that I would like to discuss with you. Well, first of all, of course, we're all interested. Do the Swiss actually feel that this big war is going on in Europe for the second year already? Do any spheres of life in Switzerland, are they affected by this war in any way? And are the local media still covering this war, its political, economic, and geopolitical implications?
Well, since February 24th of last year, actually, a wave of solidarity swept over Switzerland, and this solidarity is still here today. And for example, you can walk in Swiss cities, you will see many Ukrainian flags. And yes, the Swiss media are still covering the war, both when it comes to the suffering endured by the Ukrainian population, but also more broadly on the consequences of the war for Europe and the world. And actually 2 weeks ago, I had two journalists of a widely read Swiss magazine that came to Kiev, and they accompanied me in Kiev and in Kharkiv. So that I think shows really the interest. And what we saw also was the solidarity of the Swiss population when they welcomed more than 80,000 people from Ukraine who were seeking refuge in Switzerland. Now they're a bit less, they're about 65,000. But also there was a real shock to see that there was a war again on our continent. And many people spontaneously started to help where they could.
We know that in less than a month, in mid-January, Switzerland will host a meeting of advisors to the heads of state to discuss the Ukrainian peace formula. And your country is already part of the working group on nuclear security and has also expressed its desire to join the working groups on food security and fixating the end of war. So how does Switzerland see the end of war?
Well, about 3 weeks ago, the president of the Swiss Confederation, Alain Berset, he came to Kiev, and in his meeting with President Zelensky, he assured him of the ongoing support of Switzerland. And yes, Switzerland supports President Zelensky's Peace Formula initiative as a means to achieve a just and lasting peace. And we decided to join the working group on the confirmation of the end of the war because we feel that Switzerland can bring in some or share some of its experience and expertise on, when it comes, for example, to mediation or to the legal provisions of a ceasefire. And we're also ready to bring in the experiences and the views of the countries of the Global South into the discussion. I think that's really important. But then, well, any armed conflict in general ends with a negotiation. But of course, it's up to Ukraine in the end to decide how and when it wants to negotiate with Russia. Switzerland stands at disposal for its good offices whenever the parties wish so.
I understand, thanks. Well, while the war is ongoing here on the Ukrainian battlefields, obviously, Russia is also really keen on provoking different kinds of artificial crises. So these hybrid warfare tools that are in the hands of the Russians are working sometimes. And we've seen the latest example of some sort of tensions provoked by Russia at the Finnish border. Does Switzerland face any sort of such artificial crisis provoked or instigated by Russia? And if so, what measures does the government take to deter or prevent or tackle them?
Switzerland constantly steps up its means to prevent any threat to its national security, whatever this comes from. And yes, cybersecurity has grown hugely in importance, of course, at all levels in recent years. And yes, Switzerland is just, the government decided to step up the National Center for Cybersecurity into a fully fledged federal office on the 1st of January 2024. And at the same time, and also to anticipate challenges to national security, a new state secretariat for security policy will be established in the Federal Department of Defense, also on the 1st of January. Yes, there are such actions. For example, last June, when President Zelensky made his virtual address to the Swiss Parliament in the weeks before, there had been several distributed denial of service attacks on the targeted different Swiss organizations and authorities.
Interesting. Well, now comes the important question for many average Ukrainians that are not really about politics, they're just reading the news. Neutrality. Switzerland is well known for its neutral status, and it's proven to be effective for the country. But just to make it clear for the ordinary Ukrainians who see that Switzerland prohibits third countries to re-export the weapons that have been made or partially made by Switzerland to Ukraine for our war effort to repel Russian aggression. How can you explain this move and how does it correspond with the overall understanding of what Russian aggression means and what must be done to prevent it? Maybe you have some easy, simple explanation just for the viewers.
Well, I'm fully aware that this is a very sensitive issue, and so well, let me try to explain the underlying legal rationale. So the basis of Switzerland's neutrality is neutrality law. And neutrality law only applies to the military sphere. And basically, well, a neutral state cannot do two things. It cannot join a military alliance, and it is not allowed to support warring states militarily. But beyond neutrality law, the Swiss government is also bound by well, our own legislation, by our War Material Act. And this act actually also has a provision that excludes exports of war material to warring parties. So that's about the export. The provision is also relevant, however, when Switzerland is requested by other countries to give its consent to the transfer, or as you said, the re-exportation of war material. And so due to the export criteria that we have in this War Material Act and this principle of equal treatment that we have in neutrality law, that's exactly the reason why Switzerland cannot agree to the transfer of, or the re-export of war material of Swiss origin to Ukraine. So what the Swiss government does is it applies the law, the existing law. But we hear Ukraine, and actually in the Swiss parliament there are several proposals that are being discussed on amending this War Material Act. And these proposals are currently being discussed in the relevant commissions and in the parliamentary chambers, but a decision has not been made yet. But let me also stress here that neutrality does not mean indifference. Far from that. Switzerland has Switzerland has condemned in the strongest possible terms Russia's military aggression against Ukraine, also in the UN Security Council, of which Switzerland is an elected member in 2023 and 2024. Switzerland has adopted all the EU sanctions, and we'll see in our conversation today, I hope, is also that Switzerland provides support in a wide range of areas to Ukraine, in those areas where it has, or we think we can have an added value. And this solidarity is here to stay.
Well, speaking of assistance, a very significant issue is the utilization of frozen Russian assets. So on December 12th, the European Commission approved the proposal for the mechanism of using those funds, the revenues from Russia's frozen sovereign assets, for the benefit of Ukraine. Switzerland itself has frozen approximately 7.7 billion Swiss francs. It's about 81 billion in financial assets belonging to Russians as part of Russia's sanctions. But your country is not a member of the EU. And the question is, will your government be guided in the relevant decision-making by the move made by the EU? Or how do you feel about that?
So, first of all, the Swiss government has taken note of the political agreement that was reached within the EU last week. And yes, we will monitor the developments regarding these two specific directives of the EU, and the government indeed will determine what action, if any, must be taken on the Swiss side. And in addition, yes, Switzerland has and continues to monitor all the other steps that are taken at the international level concerning sanctioned Russian assets, and I think in particular the discussion within the G7 or within the EU on the immobilized Russian state-owned assets.
And another practical question on the Swiss assistance to Ukraine. I know that in late September, your government has approved 100 million Swiss francs for farmland demining. Are we talking about financial assistance, or is it about the demining equipment that is to be provided to Ukraine?
Well, humanitarian demining will be a key priority of Switzerland for the coming years in Ukraine. You know, the mine clearance of schools and hospitals is an absolute humanitarian imperative. And at the same time, well, the depollution of farmland is equally important to start the recovery of the Ukrainian economy. And so Switzerland, what we want to do is, I mean, to respond to Ukraine's priorities and needs, combined with providing Swiss expertise. And so the package we devised is actually has different directions. It's about mine clearance, including of farmland, but it is also about providing machines and the relevant monitoring and training associated with the delivery of these machines. And there is also a focus on new or innovative technologies with regard to demining. I think what is also important is risk education. I attended in Kharkiv 2 weeks ago a class that was given by a Swiss foundation to children, 10-year-old children, on the risks caused by mines. And we have also the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, which will and actually is already providing capacity building to the Ukrainian authorities. But what we want to do is that's about the assistance, but what we want also to do is at the diplomatic level to keep up the momentum for mine action in Ukraine, and we will organize jointly with Ukraine in April in a workshop in Kiev. And then in autumn next year, we plan a ministerial conference in Geneva together.
I understand. Speaking of Russian war crimes committed in Ukraine, we know that the international community naturally condemns all those atrocities. Does Switzerland plan to take an active part in the investigation of Russian war crimes in Ukraine, including the abductions and illegal deportations of Ukrainian children?
Well, Switzerland is firmly convinced that war crimes and violations of international humanitarian law and human rights law must be investigated and prosecuted in each and every event. The fight against impunity for the most serious crimes is also a priority of Switzerland, and that's why we are in favor of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. And Switzerland joined exactly 1 month ago the core group of those countries that are advocating such a tribunal. And Switzerland also joined the Register of Damage of the Council of Europe, which will record evidence of damage, loss, or injury occurred on the territory of Ukraine since February 2024. And on concrete assistance, just last week actually a group of Swiss forensic experts left Ukraine. They were here about 1 month to support the ICC and to collect or gathering information and evidence which one day can be used in court. And also last week I had the privilege to hand over free full-cycle DNA analyzer machines to the State Scientific Research Forensic Center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to help the forensic experts in their work on the identification of people missing. And I really hope that these machines will help the experts in their extremely important work to find answers for all those families that have loved ones, relatives that are missing.
Well, on the receiving end of Russian aggression are, of course, Ukrainian military and civilians, the victims of those aggression. And of course, as a country at war, we find it sometimes challenging to have enough capacities to provide for quality rehabilitation programs for those. Can Switzerland help Ukraine in providing such rehabilitation assistance to victims of Russian aggression?
Let me just briefly say that actually Switzerland's support for Ukraine did not start only last year. I mean, we are in Ukraine with cooperation projects on the ground for more than 25 years. We supported the strengthening of democratic institutions, of decentralization, of sustainable cities, but actually also healthcare. Yeah, cooperation in the health sector has been a priority for many years, and this will continue. And yes, of course, there will be an enormous need for rehabilitation services in the coming years, and we already started to support efforts in this area, and we will continue to do so. And on the war trauma rehabilitation, with Swiss funding, there is an important project that aims at, well, at different aspects, but for example, to provide equipment to healthcare facilities, but also to train those practitioners that are working in rehabilitation. It also, one important issue is to develop the legislation actually to strengthen the whole rehabilitation system in Ukraine in the coming years. So yes, to your answer, we are and we will support Ukraine in this field.
Well, speaking of Switzerland's massive presence in Ukraine in many respects, I know that recently Business Ombudsman Roman Vashuk has met with Swiss businessmen operating in Ukraine for the first time since the full-scale invasion. Can you tell us a bit about Swiss businesses operating in Ukraine and what are their main achievements and results over the past period?
So, well, the Swiss companies operating in Ukraine cover a wide range of sectors of activity, from machine building to pharmaceuticals, to logistical companies, to nutrition. And actually I'm glad to say that all the companies that were here before February 24th, actually they stayed in Ukraine. For some, of course, the situation is not easy. But I must say I admire really the resilience of the management and the staff of these companies. Some of them had to change their business model to readapt to the new realities. And some also, or many of them actually, provided humanitarian assistance in their respective field of activity to the local communities where they are located. And what we also see currently is there are even examples of companies investing into new factories in Ukraine. And I think this really shows how unique the situation in Ukraine is, because we provide humanitarian assistance, there are cooperation projects, we have a peace and human rights program, but at the same time we promote small and medium enterprises and their competitiveness, and we have big companies investing. And all this takes place at the same time. And that's, I think, is really quite unique in Ukraine.
Well, by the way, in one of your interviews, you said you sought to sort of get out of your bubble and travel
Yes.
more across Ukraine, including to the regions most affected by Russian aggression. And you just spoke about your trip to Kharkiv. Can you please elaborate on your future plans?
Yes, actually, and I already started to do so, in fact, and well, beyond the trip to Kharkiv, I was also 2 weeks ago to Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhia, and Vysokopilya in Kherson Oblast. And during these trips, actually, beyond, well, meeting the governors, I also meet beneficiaries of projects that were funded by Swiss humanitarian aid. And so ordinary people, and I could witness what these people have gone through and are still going through. For example, in Vysokopilya, I met an old lady. She came back to her house, which was severely damaged during the occupation phase last year. And you know, after some repair of the roof and new windows, I mean, she could stay, you know, in a warm living room. And in Kharkiv, I met a 25-year-old young lady. She's an IDP from Izium, and thanks to a small grant, she was able to realize her dream and to open a bakery. And so when these examples, I mean, show me, I mean, the immense gratitude of people, and I see also that sometimes, you know, with a small project can actually have a large impact, and I see also the needs that change over time of people. And actually, Switzerland, beyond its support for the very important work that is done by the multilateral institutions of the UN system, Switzerland is one of the few countries to provide and to implement humanitarian assistance projects on its own, together with local partners, government and civil society, in the east and the south of the country. And actually, every week I have colleagues from the embassy, I mean, humanitarian aid experts, that travel to close to the front line, and this allows us to react very quickly and very efficiently to the needs of those that need it most.
Well, I see that Switzerland interacts with Ukraine at so many levels, NGOs, government, commercial, but let's speak about the human contact, human to human. Given the large number of Ukrainian IDPs, not IDPs, but refugees in Switzerland, do the Swiss now know more about Ukraine, about its culture, including modern art maybe? And what would you think could be the prospects for cultural dialogue between our two nations?
Well, I think Switzerland and Ukraine are both proud of their culture, their traditions, their language. Well, as you know, Switzerland has even four national languages, so we believe in diversity and inclusion as a motor of progress. I think also both our countries cherish their independence, and well, we shared with Ukraine our experience on decentralization, and I think we can learn a lot from Ukraine when it comes to the digitalization of public services. But you're right. Now, I mean, there are many interactions taking place in Switzerland between Swiss families and their Ukrainian hosts. At the same time, as a government level, we funded measures last year to protect the cultural heritage of Ukraine, and there were actually two exhibitions in Basel and in Geneva with artwork from Ukrainian museums, and I think that was a possibility for the Swiss public to get acquainted with it. I also hope that in not so distant future we will again be able to showcase with creativity here in Ukraine. A nice example actually last year was the first ever Kiev Design Week, which was organized by young curators and designers from Ukraine, was actually hosted in Zurich.
Oh.
And I must say I believe in what I would call design diplomacy, you know, as a tool for dialogue between our countries, to bring together innovation, the creative economy, science and culture. And I'm also convinced that, well, designers will probably play an important role in when it will come about to find innovative solutions for a sustainable recovery of Ukraine.
Well, we all hope so, and we also hope that the end of war comes eventually, and we will be able to develop our cooperation between the two countries on a whole different level and peaceful circumstances. That'll be really great. Thank you for being with us today. We had the Ambassador of Switzerland to Ukraine, Mr. Felix Baumann, with Укрінформ. Stay with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you
so much.